I'm Aaron.
I'm Scott.
You're listening to the Racer to Racer podcast presented by Race 92. This is one of our special edition Week of Indy podcasts. Today's guest is Howdy Holmes.
Yeah, what a great interview, right?
Yep, obviously, for those of you who don't know, he's the president and CEO of a company that was started in his family called Jiffy Mix. If you've ever been into Walmart, Kroger, any kind of grocery store, I'm sure you've seen it. His name's actually on the side of the box. But he definitely, that started in his family, and he kind of, used that to help push his racing career. If you look at, a lot of old photos of him racing, Jiffy Mix is always on the car. So he talks a lot about that, and then really just his career with racing. And, I think some of the things that he says, I think will surprise a lot of people. He talks about potentially, having the opportunity in Formula One at some point. And that I had never, heard of that before or heard of that opportunity that was, potentially there for him. So, I think, there'll be little things like that that'll, really surprise people.
Yeah, it was a great interview, and Howdy, very like all of our drivers that come on here, very driven guy, very competitive, very cut and dry in like how he looks at things, and which I appreciate. I mean, he definitely has, he analyzes something, makes a decision, but his road into racing was much different than a lot of people's. And I think people are going to find it interesting how he gets, how he kind of comes about racing, because he does not come from a racing family at all. And he has some great stories and is really, he had a good career. Howdy is kind of overlooked today, but Howdy had a really good career. And so I was really excited to talk to Howdy. I was glad to get his story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, without further ado for this, we'll just jump right into it. So hope you enjoy. All right. Our guest today was the 1979 Indy 500 Rookie of the Year and competed in kart for 7 seasons. He's also the president and CEO of the Chelsea Milling Company, his family business, also known as Jiffy Mix. We're joined by Howdy Holmes. Hey, Howdy, how's it going?
It's good. So I jumped in ahead of you guys. I apologize, but
oh no, you're fine.
Trying to give you a little background on my interest in racing, and other than Christmas, the one thing we did together as a family, we would go to the Indy 500. We started in 1957. So I saw my first race, 57. I was 9, and it was just like, those days, 400,000 people, and you guys have been there 1,000 times, so you know what it's like. It was like overwhelmingly cool. And, as a young guy, some people want to be doctors, and some young girls want to be nurses or professors or who knows what. I wanted to be a race car driver, but I had no idea what that was. And so for several years, my family would go, and we're in Ann Arbor, so about a 4-hour drive down to Indy. Pretty conservative family, and as you know, Kentucky Derby and the Indy 500 and the World Series and the Super Bowl and all those big events. Whenever there was one of those things going on, all the hotels would double or triple their prices, and within 50 miles, everything was jacked up, right? So we stayed outside that 50-mile radius. Like I said, conservative people, we stayed in this kind of like no-tell motel with a drive theater right next to it, and so that's the way the thing started. And so after several years of watching it as a kid, 1968 Michigan International Speedway was built, and the first summer that it was open, which was 68. That would be 1968, not 1868, just for the they offered a private driver school, and everybody within 50 miles of the Speedway, the Michigan International Speedway, got this 6-color, really slick brochure advertising the Michigan International School of High Performance Driving, and it was going to be taught by Sterling Moss. Well,
oh wow,
yeah, Yeah. Oh, wow. It's right. I doubt very seriously that Sterling Moss could identify what continent the state of Michigan was in, let alone, he probably could figure out where the United States was. But so in any event, they had a driver school that one summer, and it was taught by a guy by the name of Kenny Law and his South African mechanic, Bob Smith. Those two guys were in the area competing in the Continental Formula B series back in the day, which ran, it was like a Formula B, but different, a little bit larger tires, ran in Canada and the U.S. And hey, they had to get an instructor. They found Kenny Law and Bob, and that gave them a place to work on their car and tow to the races every year. So I went out there and sort of slid into a Formula Ford for the first time, and that was it. All of these sort of boyhood dreams and fantasies kind of like came to life, and I was going to be a race car driver.
And how old were you when you first got in the race car?
Well, it was 1968, so I was 21.
Oh.
So my first race was a international Formula Ford race when I was 23 at Daytona. But the way I started after this driver's school, which lasted 1 week, was I ordered a set of tools through an Auto World catalog for $69.95, and you got the kind of the dark green toolbox with some open ends in it and a rubber hammer and a couple other things, and bought a Royale RP3 Formula Ford from a distributor in Ann Arbor by the name of John Stringer. He had his business Road Sport International, and somehow he got a distributorship for Royale cars. The only one he ever sold was the one to me. And I built a homemade trailer with a boyhood friend and bought my engine manual, which was a English Ford 1600cc engine from my college bookstore. And the guys at Chelsea Milling Company built me a 12 by 20 foot plywood garage in the corner of one of the warehouses. And I was in business, man. You know, that was it. No more idea in a rabbit what was going on, because as you guys know, Formula Ford's a road racing car, so it's a European sport. It wasn't a sprint car, it wasn't a midget, etc. The lower rungs of in those days the kind of path to Indy. So I was a fish out of water at least 2 or 3 times over, and it's just, you guys know, keep in mind, this is the late 60s, early 70s. There wasn't any newspaper that had articles about motorsports, or sure, there was football, there was basketball, there was baseball, and occasionally hockey in those days. But in Europe, every little town had a motorsports writer about motorsports. So no family background. I was 21 years old. No way to get information, so you learn it yourself. And at the end of the day, it's a great way to learn things.
I agree.
Yes, sir, Scott.
I'm sorry, I lost you there for a second.
Yeah, no, that's right. So that was the call it humble beginnings for to be factual, and I guess the difficult part was I didn't know anybody that was in racing, and nobody in my family had any heritage in racing. So there was the only kind of source of information was a Sports Car Club of America back in those days.
Right.
And I was in the Central Division, and it was amateur stuff. And certainly some folks that went through SCCA ended up, making a professional career, but not very many. And so it was it was challenging at best.
So when you first got into racing, was the Indy 500 always like your end goal?
Actually, oddly enough, no. It was because I got in as a road racing, and my career path was headed towards Formula One, and as a road racer, and I will admit that since I didn't know any better, the belief, my belief, was that road racing was, even though it was not American heritage, was a more difficult path than oval racing. And the belief, I think, by a lot of people is that roundy round racing is not as complicated as road racing, when in fact it's significantly more complicated. And here's why: the average speed is significantly faster. Racing is a mental discipline, not a physical discipline. So on ovals, once you get going, your average speed doesn't change very much. So consequently, you don't have these points of interest to keep your mind focused. Like braking and shifting, turning left, turning right, going uphill and downhill. All of these kind of, whether it's depth perception changes or hand-eye coordination, whatever the case may be, the level of focus is significantly much more narrow in oval racing, and certainly something like Indy, where the speeds are terrifically fast, than road racing, where you have all these several other aids to keep your mind focused. Well, that didn't occur to me until the first time I got Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and in '79, and put my foot in it, and all of a sudden I'm back in the seat, like, whoa, what's going on here? And then I discovered that it's difficult. And that probably explains why a lot of European road racers won't come to Indy, because they know all that stuff, and you sort of can't drop a wheel off, on turn 3 or turn 4 or turn 8 into the dirt and spray some gravel someplace. It hurts when you hit that wall.
Oh yeah.
Especially back then. I mean, it still hurts now, but obviously it's a lot safer now. So definitely not as big as consequences as it was, back in the 70s and 80s.
Well, Aaron, I don't know. When I started driving, I used to be 6'3", and now I'm 5 foot. Something. Just kidding.
You now you said you really got the bug at Indy. Were you ever a car guy, like air quotes car guy?
No, here's another oddity about me, of which there are many. I was never a car guy, and I'm still not a car guy. As a quote unquote, race car driver, the assumption is that you know a great deal about cars, whether they're street cars or racing cars. And my love has always been the art of driving. So commonly over the years, and still to this day, I get asked, first question is, well, Howdy, I'm thinking of buying a new car. What do you think I ought to get? I go, I have no idea. I have no idea. The other popular question is, my car goes, what's wrong with it? And I go, can't really tell you. You might want to take it to your dealership and their mechanics, and they'll be able to help you. And people look at me like, I'm some kind of freak, because I don't know the answers to those questions, because they just automatically assume that you do. So, not a car guy. First race is 23 years old. That's ancient. It was ancient then, and nowadays it's beyond ancient. So, but it was a boyhood dream. I was very successful at it, and thankful for the opportunity to have participated. And I will have to say, even though initially my career path was towards Formula One, I couldn't be more pleased to be able to say that I raced at the Indianapolis 500 times. And in our company, after my parents died in early 2000, I've taken their tickets, and I've taken about 146 employees to the race, like 7 at a time. And each time I go, and it's kind of a working weekend for me, and we are very careful to choose employees whose personalities will get along with one another, because you're kind of held hostage for 36 hours. You don't want some sort of thing to disrupt the whole group. So each year that I've gone back, I have a greater and greater appreciation for what I did, and I'm proud to be able to say I'm one of 600 people that have ever done that. I think that's accurate, and so it's pretty cool.
You, where'd you get your first taste of victory at? Like the first time you won something?
Oh, yikes! This could be a very revealing story, but I'll share it with you. I have a problem of telling the truth way too much. It might have been 7th grade, when I went to junior high school. It was 7th, 8th, and 9th, and I was fortunate enough to be raised in a family that was very conservative, but yet we didn't we weren't suffering in any way, and I guess the area that my folks lived was maybe a little better than the average place. And when I first went to 7th grade, some of my classmates who lived in lesser surroundings, first day of school, kind of surrounded me when the buses were coming, and wanted to give me some hard time because of my standing, so to speak. And there were 3 guys, and I took them all out, and that was it. And so I don't know why I shared that with you, but I did, and so there you go. I've always been a very serious competitor, naturally gifted as an athlete in many types of sports, other than basketball. I was kidding about the 6'3" thing. I really can't dunk. So sports were probably the first battlefield of which I had wins and so on, Scott.
And then when were you able to finally realize that on the racetrack, that first victory?
It was actually my first race at Waterford Hills in the Detroit region of the Central Division Sports Car Club of America. The driver's school that they have at the end of it, and I lapped 3/4 the entire field. And in this Royale RP3 that was owned by John Stringer of Road Sport International. I have no more idea how that car was set up, and it really just didn't matter. I just kind of outdrove everybody.
So, and you were talking about your competitiveness, and I've been in auto racing since I was a little kid, and that's the vein I've seen in almost all racers, especially any that have any success, is this just high level of competition that just I would say more so than a love of, like you said, you're not a car guy. Is more so I've seen the competitive side more than I've seen just a love of cars or that type of thing.
Yeah. I think there's something about race car drivers and athletes in general, Scott and Aaron, that I've never heard talk about, especially race car drivers. and that is drivers are information junkies. And what I mean by that is that if you think about all the things that go on in a race car, the 240 plus things that you can change, and if you change more than one of them at a time, you don't have any idea which helped and which didn't. So you need to be methodical. And so that's just whatever car you're driving. You throw this into 32 other people, and thanks, honey. I just got some water.
Yeah, you sure do.
If you didn't hear her, she said, "Yeah, you sure do." Anyway, so there are all these things on the car you're driving to change that you can confuse yourself. But oh, by the way, at Indy, there's 32 other people. So there's all this stimulus that's going on all around you, in your own little world, and the 32 other worlds that are satellites around you. And oh, by the way, every lap, the sun could be out, go behind the cloud. So it's constantly changing. And, whether fuel loads as you get lighter and tire degradation, et cetera, it's constantly something going on. And drivers need to kind of figure out, we're going to relate this to a business, is, look, here's all the stimulus, identify what all the stimulus is, do analysis, make a decision, input that decision, see what the execution's all about, and then decide whether that was good, bad, or indifferent. The challenge is it happens like this, right?
Right.
For hours at a time, and you don't get timeouts. So it is extremely mentally draining, which I don't think it is brought to the surface much at all, and even today about driving. But I suppose explanation, gentlemen, is that the TV and stuff isn't a look behind the scenes. Racing is entertainment. Racing dollar is, do I want to go to the baseball game? Do I go to the opera? Do I want to go send my kid to camp? Do I want to go to a race? Whatever. It's entertainment dollar, and they don't really understand all the work, which is 90% of it behind the scenes. The race is just the end result of all the preparation. And I don't hear people talk about that, and maybe because it's not so interesting.
Yeah, I think it's not. I think it's hard for some people to grasp. Just like you said, that I always had this analogy. I've worked with different drivers. I always like to work with a driver who I always say if a bomb went off in the middle of the racetrack, he could acknowledge the bomb going off, but he could still take care of what he's working with.
Yeah.
And that's, I realize, extreme, but in a lot of cases, if you come upon a crash, you got to analyze, like you said, in moments. Yeah. You've got to make decisions that are, split second. And if and you see some guys who always miss a crash, and you see some guys who just can't get away from them.
Yeah. And I'm not really sure. The ones that can't get away from them, does that mean that their processing is a little slower than the next guy, or does that mean they're less lucky, or all the above?
Right. Yeah, absolutely, and that's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, I think, people just watch the race or qualifying. They don't see behind the scenes. There's so many, stories about people or teams working, like 48 hours straight working on a car, getting it ready. And, the person watching the race has no idea about that.
And I'm, for a long time, tell you a funny story. I was hauling my Formula Ford to Watkins Glen for a regional race. Actually, it was outside the Detroit region in SCCA, and I pulled into town. This is like 1971. Pulled into town. In those days, I needed some gas in my van, which, oh, by the way, was also my hotel room. And in those days, guys at gas stations, people would come out and check your oil and fill your gas and do your windshield. And I had this Formula Ford on this homemade trailer, and it had a cover on it. And so it was clearly, to me anyway, a Formula car, single seat, open wheel car. And this attendant comes out and he goes, "Wow, how fast does that go in the quarter mile?" And I'm thinking, I could spend an hour and a half trying to explain all these things to this guy, but at the end of the day, it's really not going to make a great deal different. So just let it go and go on about your business.
That's true too. Yeah, that's a great point. So you ran in Formula Fords and obviously you had success there. And now what was your next step past as you worked your way up? What was your next steps?
Formula Ford, Formula Super V, and it started with a air-cooled engines and then water-cooled engines, and that was like 72, 73. 74, I was in, it was Rookie of the Year, Formula Atlantic.
Okay.
And there's a pretty famous gentleman, sadly he's gone now, that I beat out for Rookie of the Year, and that was Jill Villeneuve. And I was in Formula Atlantic in 74, just did 3 races, 75 full season, 76, 77, 78 I won the Atlantic Championship, 79. As it turns out, as I said earlier, my path was, or so I thought, was towards Formula One. And after winning the Atlantic Championship, which is really kind of one step below F1 in North America, and Jill Villeneuve, who won 77, went on to McLaren in Formula One, and then to Ferrari. I was hoping that I could follow his footsteps. And there were discussions with the Lotus team in 78, and if you recall, it was 78. It was Mario Andretti and Ronnie Peterson driving for Lotus, and their cars were the best. And I'll go on record saying that the car has about 65% to do with winning, a driver about 25%, and the remaining 10% is either make your own good luck or make your own bad luck. And that year, Ronnie Peterson was killed during the season, and Mario went on to win the championship. And there was some dialogue about me joining Mario for the 79 season for All-American team. And I was asked to go to Watkins Glen, which in those days, the U.S. Grand Prix was in October. And so I showed up there, and the European press, knew who I was. And I was always kind of my own manager and everything, doing everything myself. And in hindsight, that probably wasn't ideal. And so they said, "Well, what are you kind of doing here?" And I kind of suggested what was on the table, sort of. And that was the end of that. It was like over, done, out, you're done. And so that was in October. And in March, a representative for Texaco called, and it's a great story because it has a relationship to today's robocall. This guy called, his name is Robertson. He was representing Texaco, and he phone rings, and he said, "Are you Howdy Holmes?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, first thing was, "How'd you like to drive in the Indy 500? And I thought it was a prank call.
Right.
No, seriously. And I said, "No, thanks. I'm playing paddleball that weekend." And the guy didn't know what to say. And, "Oh, no, I'm serious. Scott, I just love the look on your face, like, I can't believe this is happening." Yeah, it really did happen that way. And he goes, "No, I'm serious." And so it turns out that that Sherman Armstrong was a car owner, and Paul Leffler was his chief mechanic. And Paul kind of was, always regarded as the very best in sprint car racing and so on. And Sherman was a guy that was born and raised in Winchester, Indiana. Worked for Anchor Hocking, and in the glass blowing business, and he decided, wait a minute, I can do this on my own. He left there as an employee, started his own business, Sherman Armstrong, and became very well compensated for the whole thing. But really hadn't traveled much outside of Indiana, let alone maybe the county that they were in, and got into motorsports and started winning and everything, and it got to be too easy. So Sherman thought he'd, move up to IndyCar racing. And so the theory was, so here's this new team. Why not get an unknown IndyCar driver? And that was going to be the gig. New owner, new driver, see what we can do. So somehow they decided I would be the one, and I guess it's probably because I was pretty well known as the Indy or Formula Atlantic champ, and so all of a sudden my fortunes changed. I'm going from the previous fall, thought I was well on my way to a F1 career, and that got busted, to an IndyCar opportunity. So I went back to Doug Shearson, who was a dear friend, car owner, at 77, 78, and kind of the defending champion. That's never a good idea in the racing series, because how are you gonna do any better than win the championship?
Right.
So, but so that Indy thing worked out, and I the race before I went to India, I won in Mexico, and went to Indy without having any idea what to expect, and it was a 3-year-old Wildcat chassis, with Offenhauser engine. And it turns out, in hindsight, that was a pretty good deal, because there was a lot of mechanics that knew how to set that car up, and that was a blessing. Even though everybody were the most popular engine at the time was Cosworth and etc. But so qualified 13th, and on lap 2 had a 2-minute pit stop because a hose clamp had come off the hose and went between the plenum chamber and the turbocharger, and I didn't have any boost. Entered on lap 4 in last place and finished 7th, and was Rookie of the Year. There are some sarcastic journalists, I'm going to put it out there that way, that say, yeah, well, you were the only rookie in the race. Well, that's true, I was. But that year, 14 tried, and I was the only one that made it. No, by the way, finished last, or started last on the 4th lap and finished 7th. So stick that in your hat and smoke it. So there you go.
Yeah, the Armstrongs. I didn't know Sherman very well. I met Paul. We had midgets in sprint cars, and Sherman can be pretty flamboyant too.
Oh yeah, with that straw hat he had.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was. Well, I tell you what was really interesting was when you talk about the yin and the yang. When you saw Sherman Armstrong having a conversation with Roger Penske. I mean, and I'm not trying to take anything away from one or add to the other, but there was quite a difference in kind of understanding and ambiance and education and so on. But hey, Sherman gave me my best shot, and always respect him for that.
Oh yeah, no, and Rookie of the Year you can only win it once, that's always a good one to have.
You bet.
So you were talking about going to the 500 with your family when you were younger. So what was it like actually your first year at Indy? Like, I'm sure it was very surreal to you. Because, I mean, you spent all those years watching from the grandstands, and all of a sudden you're in the race.
Aaron, I was lucky in the sense that, as I mentioned, in 1979, I got this call in March and went to the Speedway in May.
Mm-hmm.
If I knew maybe a year in advance, I probably would have had a damn good chance of psyching myself out.
Oh, yeah.
Because Indy is such a big deal. But because I didn't have much time to process that, I just went in and, hey, okay, so another race. And race car drivers have an ability to compartmentalize things. And even though at that point, my first race was in 71, this is 79, it's only 8 years later, you learn that you can't react to things. Well, you
Right.
can, but you better learn to manage them, or you're not going to last very long. You're not going to be very good, because emotion is a problem when it comes to race car driving. And so I do remember walking into the old garage, and the first driver that I ran into was A.J. Foyt. And he's walking along with Jack Starnes coming towards me and towards him. And, this is a guy that, as earlier, I'm sitting in the stands. This is one of my heroes, right? Along with Al and Bobby and Gordon Johncock and, all of us old dudes. And I'm going, oh, shit, this is A.J. Foyt. And, I'm going to try and qualify this race. And so and racing is really about intimidation all the time. And so he and Jack are walking towards me, and I said, AJ, I put my hand out. It's nice to meet you personally. Well, Jack steps in. He says, when you get tired driving cars, why don't you ride our horses? And so I timed my handshake with AJ to make sure that he was off balance, so that I pulled him towards me, and he immediately knew that I was messing with him, which was it was like, okay, I don't really know you, but you got this gamesmanship going, so there was, at least I took it as respect. Maybe he thought I was crazy or a loon. I don't know, but it was good stuff. That was kind of interesting, and I've always admired AJ and Mario and Gordon Johncock, all those guys, and but you had to kind of put that kind of admiration aside when you become a competitor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what was May of 1979 the first time you ever drove an Indy car then? Like you never did any kind of testing before?
No. Oh no. Would have been nice. No, you had to do the the rookie test things and certain laps at X miles an hour, and then certain other laps a little bit faster than that, and so on. And I got there on a Sunday night. Didn't get on the track until Thursday, as I recall. And I brought with me some two-part foam to make a seat. I had enough foresight to do that. And, they didn't do, these guys were not used to Indy cars and doing that kind of stuff. And putting back in those days, put a, big garbage bag in there and fill of stuff. And they go, what the hell are you doing? Well, look, man, this is how you make a seat. Well, so, we were all learning together. And so I got on Thursday for the first time. I kind of breezed through the rookie test and didn't have a lot of laps before we entered qualifying. And I think it was 185.864 could be was my qualifying speed. And that was good enough for 13th.
It's are you how do I want to put this? Do you, the more you ran Indy, did it mean more to you the more times you come back? Or did it, because sometimes it seems like some people it means more the more you run it, and other people it's kind of linear, it doesn't really change.
Question, Scott. I would say that it was always the race that would make anybody's year. So I don't know that one was any more important than another. And I think if that was the case, I would question myself. Why is that?
Right.
Hey, it's the Indy 500. It happens once a year.
Right.
Period. Dot. So, but I will say that after I retired and went back, as I mentioned earlier, taking employees, it was at that point in time that I realized what a big deal that race is. And every race since, like I took taken 146 people, and each year that I go back, I am more and more aware of how lucky and fortunate and how few people do that each year, because I'm looking at it not as a race car driver, I'm looking at it as a spectator, and I put these things in perspective. As a race car driver, uh, most of the time, and road racing and so on, if it rains, it rains. If it doesn't, it doesn't. If it's cold or rain, I mean, it's the same for everybody. So you just don't even think about that stuff. I mean, if you spend a lot of time thinking about the emotional piece, you're not really
Right.
that good of a race car driver.
Oh, absolutely. So 1982, was 1982 your first full season?
It was, yes, with Doug Sherson and Domino's Pizza.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had the Jiffy Mix sponsorship. You pretty much had that your whole career, right? Like it was always on the car.
No, it wasn't always. Whenever there was room available on the car, like with Doug and Domino's, there wasn't any room on the car. That was 72 or pardon me, 82 and 83. In 79, it was on the car. 84, it was 85. I wasn't in the race in 86 or 87, and 88 it was. My perspective there was I was very proud of Chelsea Milling Company and our brand Jiffy Mixes, and as a brand we don't do any advertising. So to me, it looked like a opportunity to bring attention to the brand because of my relationship to the family and the brand as a family member. But because of that, it put me in a really awkward spot. And let's be realistic. Racing's about bringing money. It's about putting together deals, which I hated about racing. Because I would have been preferred to be respected for my ability to drive a race car, not for my ability to find sponsorship. But hey, that's the name of the game, and so I don't ever regret having that opportunity. And but it wasn't always on the car. No.
Yeah, I was talking about listening to some of those other podcasts. I think it was one you did for Michigan. It was like 5 years ago for Michigan University of Michigan for like entrepreneurship hour or something. And they were talking about that you guys never did advertising. That was actually the first time that you ever did any type of advertising. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Oh wow.
And so consequently, ever since then, which was 400 years ago. We get up for mud wrestling contests, for snowmobile racing, for automobile racing, and it's at the point where nowadays people just will solicit any brand to try and get support because my participation in racing has long been forgotten by most of the world because it's been 30 30 some odd years since I retired. 1988 was my last race.
Wow.
You drove for you say I forgot you drove for Morales. You drove for Alex and Andy and
Yeah, yeah. That's an interesting story. I got hurt pretty badly in 1985. I was driving for the Forsyth team.
Mm-hmm.
And, I lost seven times the wheels came off the car, and the last one put me in the hospital and out of racing for a year and a half. So needless to say, there was something up with that. But in 1983, I had made the decision to leave racing and re-enter the family business. I had a 5-year exit plan so that I could honestly differentiate between my heart and my head. Because those things, if you're doing something that you love to do, sort of leaving it is not easy, and you prefer to leave it and be done with it, and not want to be looking over your shoulder and say, I've got unfinished business, et cetera, et cetera. And so 2 years into this plan, I got hurt, and in hindsight, it helped me solidify the decision to leave. But at the same time, it was 2 less years that I had intended to drive. And I went back to Chelsea Milling Company in November of '87. Then this opportunity with Johnny Caples showed up, and I'm glad I did it. It was a nightmare, quite frankly, and not at all uncomfortable in saying so. And but it convinced me beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was sayonara, folks. It's on to something else.
And after you stopped driving, you did you were a TV analyst, right?
No, I actually did that early on. I think I was ESPN's first analyst for road racing and so on. And I think the reason they approached me, ESPN approached me in the early days, was because I was a friend of Paul Newman's, and he wouldn't communicate with anybody, and they knew that he would talk with me, and so I figured, crap out, and so I wouldn't betray him, Paul, that is. But I, as you can tell, sort of have a gift for gab, shall we say. My wife has pointed out times already tonight. So, but I wrote a book about racing formula car technology, and had a small advertising agency and a small marketing firm, and did all these things in and about racing because it was an opportunity to be have a wider scope.
Right.
So
we've had two. So we've only released a couple episodes, but we've had 2 young drivers we've already interviewed. One was Jagger Jones, which is PJ's son and Parnelli's grandson, and the other is Flynn Lazier, who will be releasing next day or so, which is Buddy's son. And you were just talking about marketing and that. In today's business climate, and you are obviously a businessman and were a driver, and you've seen all sides of the sport from that spectrum. Do you have any advice or any thoughts on how young drivers who don't have money available can try to find ways of getting the money?
I have advice. It's maybe not encouraging, but I don't think that's changed, Scott, quite frankly, since Moses was a pup. And that would be that, look, you're in a world that most people don't understand. And this idea of, hey, I'll put your name on the side of the car and that means something, that's trash. I mean, it doesn't mean anything unless that series is televised, and when that's televised makes a big difference. So I mean, from a return on investment standpoint, if you're gonna play the business card, then understand the business. Otherwise, don't play that card. Because I remember, 1,000 times people said, "Well, I'll put your name on the side of the card like that, like the world's going to stop and everybody's looking at it." That ain't going to happen. And in those days, there's very little TV. So, what what you need to understand is how business works, and you need to understand how motorsports works. And today, it's a heck of a lot easier to understand those two things. And there are people out there that can help you, like there wasn't when I was growing up, and others in my era. And so if you're going to approach somebody with a proposition which is defendable, okay? Because what you're talking about is your credibility. And in today's world, when I raced, there wasn't internet and there wasn't all this crazy stuff. So it doesn't take very long for anybody to get a bad rap, rightly or wrongly. So why not play it as straight as you can, right? And if you're going to ask people to sort of, spend money on you, explain one or two things. If it isn't a return on investment, explain why, what it's going to do for you. Maybe you sell 300 partnerships at $500 a piece, okay? And it's if people can afford to lose $500 and make and have a good time staying involved, okay, there are a lot of people out there that think that's a good deal. But if you're going to ask one entity or one organization to spend, a $500,000 or something, damn well better approach a company whose advertising or marketing budget is in the billions of dollars, not the hundreds of thousands of dollars, because it doesn't work, right? So understand your audience, understand who you're trying to market to, and make it realistic. Because more than anything, the credibility today is just a precious thing, and it can go away instantly.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
So I had a couple other questions. So one question, actually, this was a question from my dad. He wanted me to ask you, so when you sign your name, you draw a little like smiley face, and you have like a little X on the eye. Where did that come from?
Well, it was a little bit of I lifted it a little bit from another driver, and I'm not gonna identify who this was, but that little X is meant to be a wink. Okay, that's what that means, and I've done that. I don't know since the beginning, and I guess I've never thought of, geez, people gonna understand what that little X means or doesn't mean, and so now I'll let the cat out of the bag. And the other thing is that if you're lucky enough to be a race car driver or a professional basketball player or or an actor or something, and somebody that people look up to, I believe very strongly in you're doing it for them, right? They're coming to the track, or they're coming to the play, or they're spending their money, and you owe them something. So I was always really comfortable in standing by the fence and signing probably much longer than I should have when it was too hot and stuff like that, and kids would hand you a hat or a piece of paper or a hamburger wrapper or who knows what, and want your autograph, and they had no idea who you were. No, weren't
Right.
doing a rabbit hook. It was just that you were somebody, right?
Yeah.
So, I always thought it was important to try and make it worth the fans' while, and I would, if I would ask what their name is, and let's say a little dude says, "Well, my name's Joe," and I'd say, "Well, Joe, how do you spell your name?" And often it would be Joee, or because in the beginning it would be Joe, and I'll just write, smiley face with Joe and hand it back to him. He goes, "That's not the way I spell my name." Well, and so you just ruin it for this person. I mean, and all right, I'm gonna take that air off the table and say, how do you spell it? So if you spell your name wrong, don't blame me for writing it that way. So that's what that's all about, Aaron.
That's funny. And when we talked briefly before, I was telling you my mom had a Howdy's Rowdy's button. So how did that come about? It's kind of like a unofficial fan club, right?
Yeah. Well, no, it was official for a
Oh,
while, and there are some folks. It's actually started by a guy in Cleveland who came up with this crazy thing, Howdy's Rowdies, Rodies, and he had a line of hats and a line of clothing and all this kind of crazy stuff. And I mean, exactly, I didn't get a contract with Saks or any of these other major. It didn't exactly set the world on fire, but these little stickers were probably the most popular thing. The little black stickers with orange lettering on them, and uh, if I said it was kind of a cult thing, a fun cult thing,
right, right.
that would be my explanation. I think I've got maybe 100 of them left somewhere in the basement, and also little Howdy's Rowdy's enamel pins, which are even more rare. I've probably got 200 or 300 Howdy hats down in the basement someplace, and a bunch of stuff like that. So it was really kind of nice people that were rooting for me and wanted to start a fan club and that kind of stuff, fun stuff.
If you were to walk into your house, is there any room, or would anybody ever know you raced?
Not unless they went to my man cave. Yeah, and then they would know beyond a shadow of a doubt. When we built this house, I've always been into physical fitness, and so my wife doesn't go down in the basement, but that's my place, and so there's kind of racing paraphernalia there, and it's really interesting. Just like Indianapolis Motor Speedway, when I go back there, I can't really believe I did that. So there's pictures here and pictures there downstairs, and it's all good memories.
What year was it you sat on the front row there?
84.
It was at how was that month for you? I mean, was it just like you just focused on the front row, trying to get on the pole, or?
That year I was driving for Teddy Mayer and Tyler Alexander, and from McLaren fame and Formula One, and the first race of the season was Phoenix, and Tom won that, and I finished second, and then Long Beach. I can't remember where Tom finished, but Bobby Rahal and I kind of clashed. I was coming out of the pits, and so I think we were 1 and 2 in the standings when we went to Indy and qualified 1 and 2, and I had something go wrong electronically real early, like within 8 or 10 laps or something like that. I had to make a pit stop and came out. I don't know. It might have been 30th or something, 29th or 30th or who knows what, and let's see, that could have been finished 12th or something. But the 6 times I was at Indy, I finished 6 times, which proud to say that, and actually had the best averaging finish record of anybody from 1911 through 1988.
Oh wow.
I know that's not the case anymore because that was 400 years ago. I'm exaggerating, but it did hold up for a long time. And so Scott, it's one of these things where, okay, so you're on the front row, and that's obviously a great accomplishment, but you can't kind of let that get in your head.
Sure.
Or you shouldn't, put it that way.
It's probably nice not to sit behind the rest of the cars though, and not be in the wake and the fumes and all that.
Yeah, well, I also started in '88. I started 33rd. Was actually out of the race, and I was the last one to go out for qualifying. The gun went off as I left the pit lane in 1988 and made the race by 7/1000ths of a second.
Ooh.
So
Wow.
I've been on the front row and the last row. A little bit of everything.
We have a question that I like to ask as we kind of wind this down. I like to ask whoever it is, a mechanic, driver, whoever it is, if there was somebody that maybe we haven't discussed, somebody that maybe doesn't get credit, that you would like to talk a little bit about. Somebody that means something to you or your career, or that type of thing.
Well, I would say this in general, that there weren't that many aerodynamicists, or it was early on for engineers in the early 80s and so on, and now they're fortunately everywhere. But mechanics never really got the recognition that I think they deserved. Enormous number of hours, and they do all the work. Quite frankly, if you took the hours that mechanics put in on a race car, and then the amount of time that drivers drove that car in a race, it's not even close. So, without kind of identifying one or two, because that's not fair, I would say that mechanics in general deserve significantly more recognition and credit for their dedication. Now, at the same time, I would tell you, none of us would be in racing, if we were sane. Okay.
Right.
People don't race because they've got nothing else to do. They race because it is a passion, right? And the good news about that is, when you love something that you're doing, you really will do a good job, and whatever is necessary, you get it done. And frankly, as those of us that have had the opportunity to work in something you love, realize most of the world, whatever their job is, they don't particularly care for it. It's not enjoyable. They're not getting any rewards other than a paycheck, and so it's you're privileged to be able to do something that you love to do. And nobody would do racing because of the shortness of the hours, or the travel, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Once again, I really appreciate you you joining us on this. Like we were talking about before, you don't really do a lot of podcasts that are strictly racing, so it's definitely good hearing your story. Yeah, and that's surprising to me, because you had a pretty successful career, and that's just really surprising to me that no one's ever contacted you to do any type of interview or podcast like this.
Well, I don't know. I guess maybe it's because when I left, right? And I did not want to be one of these people that would hang out on the races
Mm-hmm.
Thinking I had unfinished business and blah 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 blah. Fortunately, I had an option to move on. I took it, and that just was overwhelming in terms of it's much like racing. The commitment is 24/7, 365.
Okay.
But it couldn't be any more opposite. You know, on one hand, you have this fast-paced world on and off the track, and then came back to a 100-year-old family business that moved at glacier pace. It couldn't be any more opposite. So I had to learn how am I going to add value to the family business, and the answer was I needed to learn how to reinvent myself, take all these skills that I learned in racing and learned well and did well, and they don't apply the same way in another environment. So it required a lot of creativity, a lot of reinvention, and a lot of kind of soul searching so that I could be a resource to the family. And somehow I managed to get through it.
Are you, when you first took over, because you guys have, 19 different mixes now? Or at least
14 on the retail side and about 27 on the food service side.
Now, where was that at when you got there? Did you have as many, or?
No, we actually had more. The company was actually in trouble in those days, and it wasn't known very well. That's what scared me a great deal. On top of that, it was a family business, and most family businesses don't make it to the second generation. In fact, only 26% make it.
Yeah.
So we had our share of family disagreements, and the business was there were a lot of cracks under the water line, and sort of going about fixing that. There wasn't a lot of buy-in to what my solutions were. A lot of resistance. So all of us had to work through that, and it was uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But we did, and so in my time, kind of more than doubled the income, and in organically and in a flat to declining market, and expanded into food service, and it's not because of me. It's got a great team around me. I played a part, of course, but it's not all about me. It's all about other people.
Yeah, everything great though needs a catalyst.
Yeah.
Somebody's
got to sit in that chair.
That's right.
It's funny. I went to Walmart the other night. I've never, to be completely honest with you, and not to disappoint you, I don't think I've ever had Jiffy Mix. So
What's wrong with you?
I know. I will now, though. Do you guys have some kind of like waffle mix?
Well, yeah, we have pancake and waffle.
Okay,
mix.
well there you go. I need to find a new waffle mix, so I'll definitely give it a try.
50 pancake and waffle mix, 32 ounces. Yeah, best deal out there. And while you're in that store, you might want to look for a honey corn muffin. It is our newest product on the retail side, and our corn muffin is the number one selling dry grocery item in the United States. But this honey corn muffin is a bomb. So listen, I appreciate your guys' time tonight. Sorry about the little.
Oh, you're good.
But we figured it all out, and I hope it was worth your while. It was mine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
Hope to see you. You say are you going to the races here?
I'm not, because last year with COVID,
Right.
You couldn't take anybody, and I'm not a real good spectator, quite frankly. When you've had the best seat in the house, watching a race, I'd rather maybe watch it on TV where I can, close my eyes every now and then, pretend I'm watching things and I'm actually snoring. So, but set the clock so you don't miss the ending.
Right. Well, no, definitely hope to see you at the track. Obviously, won't be this year, but hopefully, in future years.
Sometime in the future, Aaron.
I always remember seeing you walk around the garage, so I'm sure I've met you before. I've met a lot of former drivers, but But yeah, no, like we said, thank you so much for joining us. Taking time.
You're
Like
welcome.
you're the president and CEO of a big company, so I'm sure you're very busy.
Yeah, but hey, always happy to share something that I love doing. So appreciate you guys asking.
Well, thank you, Howdy. We really appreciate it.
We'll see you.
Take
All right.
care, Howdy.
You guys, right?
Thanks.
Take care.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.